Through the tunnel of despair to the light of hope, there are many ways to get there. But just how is at the heart of a national debate about drugs that are used to treat mental illness. Tonight, photojournalist Jessica Hoffman and I bring you the stories of two people with two very different perspectives. Andrea Schmook heads up a branch of Anchorage Community Mental Health Services that helps people find wellness through work, something she knows a lot about. Once overwhelmed by schizophrenia, Andrea's been delusion-free for more than 20 years. Despite that, the board that runs this nonprofit was reluctant to put someone with a history of mental illness in such a high-profile job.
Stepping stones to recovery. I'm the lead story. They said I would never get better.
Andrea plans to retire soon and will pass the torch to John Fuget, another survivor of mental illness. Andrea's success story is just one of many you'll find among her books. What makes Andrea's story stand out? Her fight to be free of psychiatric drugs.
You have to develop some tools, other tools that work for you.
But for John, drugs are a vital tool for keeping his bipolar brain in balance.
I got to a point in my life where I said, you know, it's not worth it. I'm going to take the medications and live maybe a duller life.
John Fuget's struggles began early in life.
When I was in high school, I had some serious thoughts of suicide.
In college, John's moods surged from lows to highs. He would work round the clock for days at a time, then do nothing for weeks. Later, in the Army, paranoia set in.
I got psychotic basically in my early 30s.
In his manic state, he felt invincible.
So it would be dark, and I would just raise my hands off the steering wheel and see how far I could go with my eyes closed to see without, without crashing.
It was the crash of the Space Shuttle Columbia, a tragedy in which he had no logical connection that he agonized over.
I was sure that something I had done had caused that space shuttle to go down.
Through it all, John's wife stayed beside him.
My wife used to say there were highways in my head. You know, I had 4 or 5 different highways, and I could be driving down all 4 of them at the same time.
Medication helped to manage the traffic in his busy brain, but not without trial and error. Zyprexa was one of the drugs he tried.
It worked wonderfully. Within 2 or 3 days of taking it, I was completely back to what my wife and everybody would say was normal.
But within a month, his blood sugar levels zoomed to 900, 10 times higher than normal.
And just about died from it.
John switched to another medication and had no problems. Over the years, he's taken about a dozen different drugs. Today, he's down to 2 that he takes on a daily basis, a few others as needed, a sign of real progress.
Well, you have to be in the driver's seat. You have to participate.
This photo was taken after a stay at the Alaska Psychiatric Institute, a time when Andrea saw the world through sleepy eyes, when medicines kept darkness at bay.
It was January 13, 1977.
Just as the children in the neighborhood were headed to school here at Chester Valley Elementary, voices told Andrea to tell them their parents had died and gone to heaven.
And the kids in the neighborhood knew there was something wrong with Mrs. Schmook.
Soon, the whole neighborhood was about to learn just how wrong.
And as I looked down the stairs, I saw the bird cage up against the wall, and it had a cover on it.
A cover she grabbed and draped over her head, then headed off to school.
I became the Virgin Mary. She was the Mother of God. You couldn't get any better than that.
Andrea had stuffed her pockets full of popcorn, which she scattered as a blessing as she walked through what she thought was Armageddon.
I could see trees falling over. I could hear my neighbors on the right screaming in agony.
Andrea made it to the school and went inside where the principal intercepted her. The police came and took her to API, where she says she was told she would be in and out of the hospital for the rest of her life.
I made up my mind right then and there that I was going to prove them wrong, that I was going to get better.
But it wasn't easy.
I would go off my meds. I wanted to see where I was in the healing process. And there were times, a lot of times, that I just broke down within a matter of a week, 2 weeks.
But Andrea was able to find a doctor who helped wean her from medication while she worked hard to retrain her mind. When she felt she was losing her grip on reality, she would sit and write the same words again and again.
My name is Andrea Schmook. I live at blah, 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 blah. I had to write it and read it out loud to myself to break through it. I would use that skill again because it worked. And it worked at a time when I was still pretty psychotic.
This is a kind of a room that people can come and rest.
Although John's path has been much different than Andrea's, he too has found success. Despite his chronic condition, he went on to earn a master's degree, education he uses to help others find their way.
All right, I just wanted to double check.
John says mental illness is more complicated than anyone can imagine.
Nobody knows why the brain does what it does.
Whether it's a space shuttle disaster that you believe you caused, or a voice that tells you to save the children, when it comes to mind over meds, much remains a mystery. John and Andrea tell us that the very best medicine may come from those who are strong enough in their recovery to share what they know with others.
And we want to thank them for doing that, because it's so rare to hear someone who has suffered from mental illness actually talk about it and be so candid.
You know, that is so important, Maria, because, you know, there are just many common threads in these stories. You know, lack of sleep, childhood trauma, particularly sexual assault, are often triggers for mental illness. And tonight at 10, we're going to wrap up our series. Some of Alaska's leading psychiatrists weigh in on the mind over meds debate.
All right.
Very interesting.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thanks, Rhonda.